It started with a phone call, 6 words that shattered everything I believed about love and loyalty. But as my marriage burned, something colder and sharper began to rise inside me. They thought they'd broken me, but they had no idea what I'd become. My name is Ryan Carter, and until that night I thought I had everything a man could ask for. I'm 34, work as a graphic designer from home, and I'd been married to Emma for 7 years. We had a quiet little apartment just outside of Chicago, 2 cats, a shared Spotify playlist, and Sunday pancake traditions. I thought we were solid. I thought we were happy. It was a Wednesday evening when it happened. I still remember what I was doing, sketching a logo for a client while waiting for Emma to get home. She was running late from yoga, which never really bothered me until that night. My phone buzzed, unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. The voice on the other end was a man, calm, cold, like he'd rehearsed it. "Ryan, I don't know how else to say this, but you deserve to know. Emma's been cheating on you with me." The world tilted. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I asked who he was. He told me his name was Josh, that they'd been seeing each other for nearly 6 months. He sounded almost apologetic, almost. But I didn't hear much after that. My ears were ringing. My hands were shaking. I hung up without saying another word. I waited in silence, heart racing, mind spiraling. When Emma finally walked through the door, sweaty in yoga clothes, smiling like nothing was wrong, I didn't confront her right away. I couldn't. I just stared at her, trying to understand how the woman I loved could be living 2 lives right under my nose. Later that night, I asked her casually about her class. She lied straight to my face. That's when I broke, not with shouting, not with anger, just silence. A deep, cold silence that swallowed the room. The confrontation came the next morning. I told her everything, the call, the name, the timeline. At first, she denied it. Then came the tears, the apologies, the excuses, but it didn't matter. Something inside me had snapped. Emma moved out 3 days later, and I was left alone with my thoughts, my questions, and a pain I couldn't name. But I didn't know then, that call wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of something else entirely. After Emma left, the apartment felt like a hollow version of what it used to be. Every room echoed. Every object had a memory attached to it, our framed photo from the beach trip, the mug she got me for my birthday, even the couch felt tainted. I'd sit on it and still expect her to walk out of the bedroom, hair tied up, asking what movie I wanted to watch. But she never did. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was punishing. I couldn't sleep, not really. I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling for hours, replaying everything over and over. Was there a moment I missed? A look, a word? I kept asking myself how I'd been so blind. Was I not enough? Was she bored? Did I ever really know her at all? I stopped answering texts from friends. I canceled on work meetings. My clients were kind, assuming I was sick or overwhelmed. The truth was, I couldn't focus. I couldn't think about fonts or color palettes when my life had been torn apart like a page out of a sketchbook. Nights were the worst. The bed felt too big, the silence too loud. I tried music, then podcasts, then sleeping pills. Nothing worked. My thoughts were relentless. I hated her. I missed her. I wanted to scream. I wanted to curl up and disappear. One night, maybe a week after she left, I found myself scrolling through our old photos, smiling vacations, Sunday brunches, her wearing my hoodie and making goofy faces. I threw my phone across the room. It didn't break, but something in me did. That's when it hit me. I wasn't just grieving a relationship. I was grieving a version of myself. The man who believed in Emma. The man who thought love was enough. I started writing in a notebook, not poems or anything poetic, just raw thoughts. Anger, pain, regret. I didn't know what I was trying to do. Maybe make sense of it all. Maybe keep myself from going numb. For a while, I thought this was it, that this pain would stretch on forever. But something was changing beneath the surface, quietly, slowly. The silence that once felt like a curse began to feel like a space. A space where something new might eventually take root. I just didn't know yet what that something would be. After a couple of weeks, the tears stopped coming. Not because I was healed, but because I was running dry. I'd cried myself empty. What replaced the sadness was something colder. A dull ache, yes, but under it, there was heat. Anger, not loud or explosive, just there simmering. One morning, I opened that notebook I'd been writing in. I flipped through the pages filled with grief and blame, and I noticed something. I kept writing questions. Why did she lie? Who else knew? Was it all fake? That's when I realized I needed answers. So I started digging. First, I went through her old messages on the shared iPad she forgot to log out of. It felt wrong at first, but that feeling vanished the moment I saw the first message from Josh. My hands shook again, but not from heartbreak this time. The messages were smug, careless. They talked about me like I was an obstacle, a joke. She told him she stayed with me because it made things less suspicious. One message read, "He's sweet but dull. I feel nothing when I look at him now." Those words hit harder than the phone call. I found photos too, them together at a bar. On a weekend she told me she was visiting her sister, posing like a happy couple, laughing, like I didn't exist, like I'd never mattered. I recognized one of the bars in the photo. It was 10 minutes from my place. I felt humiliated. And then came the real kicker. I learned who Josh actually was. Not just a random guy. He worked at her firm, senior consultant, married, 2 kids, a polished man with a polished smile, probably living a double life as casually as he tied his tie in the morning. That's when the last piece clicked in my mind. This wasn't just betrayal. It was deliberate. They'd laughed at me, lied to me, used me as a cover. I stared at my reflection in the mirror that night, pale, unshaven, hollow eyes. "This ends now," I said out loud. That night I didn't cry, I didn't write, I didn't scroll through old memories. I sat in silence, the same silence that used to crush me. But this time I wasn't broken. I was awake. And for the first time since the call, I felt something sharp and clear rise inside me. I was going to make them regret everything. It's strange how quickly pain can turn into fuel when you stop trying to run from it. After that night, everything changed, not all at once, but I started waking up with a different kind of energy, still tired, still aching, but focused. My mornings didn't begin with tears or emptiness anymore. They began with planning. I started going on walks again, headphones in, hood up, letting my thoughts settle into sharper shapes. The silence I once hated now felt like space, a place to rebuild. I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do yet. All I knew was this: I wouldn't let them walk away clean. I didn't want revenge out of cruelty. It wasn't about hurting them just to hurt them. No, it was about justice, about giving back the betrayal, the lies, the humiliation in a way they wouldn't see coming. I wanted them to feel even a fraction of what I had felt, but I also wanted to feel something I hadn't felt in weeks: control. I started taking better care of myself, shaving, eating, working out at night when I couldn't sleep. I knew if I looked like I was falling apart, they'd think they'd won. That was the last thing I wanted. I also started researching not just them, but everything around them. Emma's work circles, Josh's family life, their routines. I didn't make a move yet. I was patient. I gathered information like an architect gathers blueprints. It was during one of those research nights that I stumbled across Josh's LinkedIn profile. There it was, his picture-perfect resume, his awards, his community volunteer nonsense. But what caught my eye wasn't any of that. It was a connection we had in common. A guy named Marcus, a former client of mine, and apparently someone Josh had recently pitched to. I smiled for the first time in a while. Suddenly, things weren't just falling apart anymore. They were falling into place. That night, I took a blank page in my notebook and wrote 3 words at the top in bold, capital letters. Phase 1, patience. I wasn't rushing into anything. Revenge wasn't about speed, it was about precision. The pain hadn't disappeared, but now it had a purpose. And I was done crying. It was time to start calculating. Once I had a target, everything else started to fall into a rhythm. I wasn't just living anymore, I was calculating, watching, anticipating. Marcus, the shared connection I had with Josh, was my first thread. I reached out casually, like an old friend catching up. We hadn't spoken in over a year, but he remembered me. We grabbed coffee the following week. It didn't take long for the conversation to drift to work. That's when I asked the question, pretending it was nothing. "Didn't you mention some consultant named Josh a while back?" Marcus rolled his eyes. "Yeah, overconfident, overpriced, didn't feel right, honestly." Bingo. I nodded, laughed it off, but inside I was already laying out the next move. I didn't badmouth Josh, I didn't have to. I just asked questions that made Marcus think a little harder. Questions about trust, about discretion, about how certain consultants treat clients like checkboxes. A seed planted. From there, I spent my nights learning more about Josh's professional reputation. It was built on image, polished suits, charming smiles, inflated success stories. People like that crumble when the surface starts to crack. Emma, on the other hand, was quieter. I still couldn't believe how deeply she'd lied, but I knew her. I knew what she feared most: exposure. Not just the affair being public, but the image she'd carefully crafted over the years: sweet, responsible, loyal. I wasn't ready to strike yet. I needed to watch her longer, wait for her to slip. In the meantime, I cleaned up my life, got back into work, reconnected with a few friends I could trust, though I didn't tell them much. The fewer people who knew what I was doing, the better. I played the role of healing ex-husband well, calm, quiet, productive. On the surface, I was moving on. But inside, I was drawing blueprints. I wrote out a plan, dates, names, scenarios. I didn't want chaos. I wanted elegance to dismantle their lives the way they dismantled mine, piece by piece, silently and without mercy. And I knew something they didn't. When you hurt someone who's still finding himself, you risk creating a version of him you can't predict and can't control. They thought I was broken, but all they'd done was awaken the part of me that knew how to play the long game. 2 months had passed since Emma walked out of our apartment. To most people, it probably looked like I'd moved on. I kept a steady rhythm: work, gym, meals, sleep. But underneath that calm surface, my plan was moving like clockwork. Josh was going to fall first. Not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to shake the foundation he stood on. People like him who live for perception fear quiet shifts the most, the ones they can't trace or fix. Marcus was key. I didn't push him, just kept the connection warm. I offered some design help for his new brand campaign, pro bono, a gesture of goodwill. He was grateful, open. One night over drinks, I casually mentioned that I'd heard rumors Josh was juggling too many projects, overpromising things he couldn't deliver. "Really?" Marcus asked, brows raised. I shrugged. Just what I've heard through the grapevine could be nothing. It was enough. The next time Josh pitched to Marcus's firm, he was met with polite distance. No deal, no explanation. I found out through LinkedIn 3 days later: project canceled. A few likes, a few vague comments, nothing major. But it was a beginning. I kept it going, whispered doubts through industry contacts, nudged colleagues to share small red flags about working with him. Nothing slanderous, just carefully placed truths. Turns out when you strip the polish off a man like Josh, what's left underneath is that impressive. And I made sure Emma knew about the stumble. I didn't text her directly, I never would, but I knew she still followed me anonymously. She always had a secret profile for just-in-case situations. I posted a short, vague message on my story. Funny how the first domino always falls the quietest. She saw it within minutes. I could picture her face as she read it, that sinking feeling. That question in her mind: was that about Josh? Did Ryan do something? Good, because it wasn't just about hurting them. It was about making them paranoid, making them unsure, making them feel the cracks starting to form under their feet, just like I had felt. For the first time in weeks, I slept soundly. Not because the war was over, but because I'd finally drawn first blood. And no one even knew the game had started. With Josh destabilized, it was time to move on to Emma. I wasn't looking to destroy her career or ruin her life. That would be too obvious, too messy. What I wanted was something more intimate, more surgical. I wanted her to feel what I had felt: the unease, the self-doubt, the slow unraveling of reality. Emma had always been obsessed with how people saw her. Her Instagram was perfectly curated: filtered brunches, clean desk setups, yoga poses on rooftops. Everything screamed balance, clarity, grace. She fed off the illusion of having it all together, so that's exactly where I aimed. It started with a package. A small, unmarked envelope delivered to her office. No name, no sender. Inside, a printed photo of her and Josh from one of those hidden bar nights, her hand on his thigh, both laughing. I'd found it buried in her iPad's photo vault. Nothing threatening, nothing written. Just an image. It wouldn't make her run, but it would make her sweat. She didn't know if someone was watching her. She didn't know who saw it, who sent it, or why. But that doubt, that feeling in her chest, like something was off, like she wasn't safe in her illusion anymore, that was the goal. I didn't stop there. Over the next 2 weeks, I sent 3 more envelopes. Different photos, different moments, always unmarked, always subtle. A shadow campaign meant not to expose her to the world, but to expose her to herself, to force her to look at the version of her that existed behind the curtain. And just like that, the cracks began to show. I started hearing from mutual friends small comments. Emma seemed off, distracted, not herself. She started asking people odd questions. Have you heard anything strange about me? Has Ryan reached out to you? No one had, not directly. Because I was playing the long game. I wasn't shouting from rooftops. I was whispering into her sense of security until it started to crumble from the inside. And the best part, she couldn't accuse me of anything. She couldn't prove anything. She was being haunted by her own choices. This wasn't revenge driven by rage anymore. It was justice wrapped in silence, clean, precise, and patient. I wasn't just showing her what betrayal felt like. I was making her live in the same confusion, one sleepless night at a time. I hadn't expected to see her again, not after all these years. It was a Thursday afternoon. I was working from a coffee shop downtown, my usual spot since I couldn't stand the silence of my apartment some days. The bell above the door rang and I barely looked up, but then I heard my name. Ryan. I turned and there she was. Lee. We hadn't spoken since college, a short, quiet relationship that never really ended badly, just faded with time. She looked the same, just older around the eyes, like life had smoothed out the edges but added weight to her expression. She smiled like she wasn't sure if she should be here. I stood up. Lee, wow, what are you doing here? She explained she'd just moved back into the city for work, some leadership role at a nonprofit. She'd seen me from outside, thought for a minute, and walked in. We caught up like people who used to mean something to each other but weren't sure how much they still should. I didn't tell her everything. Not about Emma, not about the plan, just enough to explain the hollow look she must have noticed in my eyes. I heard about you too, she said gently. I'm sorry. I nodded tight-lipped. It's done now. She tilted her head. You okay though, really? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say that I was fine, that I'd moved on, that I was stronger. And I was, in a way. But something about Lee, the familiarity, the warmth, made it hard to lie. I'm working through it, I said, one step at a time. She nodded like she understood more than I said. It's easy to lose yourself in the wreckage, but the version of you that comes out of it matters more than the one who got hurt. Her words sat with me long after she left. That night I didn't write in my notebook. I didn't track Emma or Josh. I just sat with the thought, who was I becoming in all of this? I told myself this plan was about justice, about balance. But Lee's visit had stirred something deeper, something I hadn't looked at in weeks. Had I become just a reflection of the people who hurt me? Or was I still me? The revenge was far from over, but the war inside me, that had only just begun. I didn't sleep much after Lee's visit. Her words kept echoing in the back of my mind like a quiet voice I couldn't ignore. The version of you that comes out of it matters more than the one who got hurt. But I wasn't ready to stop. Not yet. There was one move left, the one I'd been saving, the one I knew would hit hardest. Josh had built his career on perception, sleek branding, polished presentations, flawless confidence. But there was one thing he couldn't spin, a formal ethics complaint. I'd spent the last month collecting every piece of evidence I could, the dates he'd spent company time with Emma, conflicts of interest in their pitches, emails that crossed every professional line. I'd even heard whispers that he'd lied on a few client proposals, fudged numbers to impress execs. It took a while, but I packaged everything into a clean, anonymous report, screenshots, witness statements, metadata, nothing emotional, just facts. I sent it to his firm's compliance board, then sat back and waited. It didn't take long. 2 weeks later, the headlines were quiet but clear. Senior consultant under internal review for ethics violations. His photo disappeared from the team page. Clients distanced themselves. A few LinkedIn connections quietly vanished. I didn't celebrate. I just watched. Emma, too, started unraveling. Whether she knew I was behind it or not, I couldn't say. But her posts stopped. Her smile dimmed. She looked smaller in the few public photos that remained, like someone who'd bet on a future that had crumbled under her feet. I finally got a message from her, from that anonymous profile she thought I didn't know about. Why are you doing this? I stared at it for a long time. And then I typed, "I'm not doing anything you didn't already set in motion." I didn't send it. I deleted the message. Because in that moment I realized something. I didn't need her to know. I didn't need credit. I didn't need revenge to define me. She built a house of lies, and all I'd done was hand her the match. She lit it herself. And as I watched it all burn quietly from a distance, I felt not satisfaction, not joy, but peace. The story she wrote for me ended the night she cheated. The one I wrote for myself. It was just beginning. It's been 6 months since that call. The one that ended my marriage. The one that shattered my world. The one that started everything. I sometimes go back and read my first journal entry, the one I scribbled in the dark, heart torn open, hands shaking. It doesn't feel like me anymore, not in a bad way, just like someone I used to be, a version of myself frozen in grief. I don't recognize that man now. Since everything unfolded, I've let the pieces settle. I stopped checking Emma's socials. I don't follow Josh's downfall. I don't need to. What's done is done. Their story stopped being part of mine a long time ago, they just didn't know it yet. What surprised me most wasn't how satisfying the revenge felt. It was how unsatisfying it became once I started healing. The more I rebuilt my life, truly rebuilt it, not just as a front, the less they mattered. Their betrayal had carved out a hole in me. But once I stopped filling it with anger, I realized I could fill it with something stronger. I went back to designing full-time. I launched my own creative agency, something I'd been putting off for years. Turns out, being betrayed clears out a lot of mental clutter. Fear doesn't feel as big when you've already lost everything. And Lee, she's still around. We talk more now, coffee once a week, sometimes long walks on weekends. There's no pressure, no expectations, just presence. It's the most honest connection I've had in a long time. She sees me not as the broken man picking up pieces, but as someone learning how to build from scratch. I don't regret what I did, not entirely. I needed to take my power back. I needed to feel like I wasn't helpless. But what matters more now is who I became afterward, not the man who got revenge, but the man who learned to forgive without needing an apology. I still remember how it felt to hear Emma's voice on that call. The panic, the lies, the silence between us when she realized I knew everything. But now, when I remember that moment, I don't feel pain. I feel gratitude. Because that call didn't just end my marriage. It introduced me to the version of myself I'd been afraid to become. And he's not angry anymore. He's free.